then with that top story, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula being elected as the new Speaker of the National Assembly. Political analyst Manusha Naidu joins us now. Manusha, good evening to you, and thanks for your time. Firstly, Sbu was just telling us earlier that the level of opposition to the appointment of Mapisa-Nqakula as the Speaker of Parliament seems to be bringing the opposition together. At least they're singing from the same hymn book there. What does it mean for her time as the Speaker? What can she expect?
Good evening, Kathy, and to the viewers. I think you can expect not to be given a easy ride as the Speaker of the National Assembly. I think that's going to be clear. It has been clear today, I think, when you look at the votes, you look at the fact that there were 298 votes cast for this election. Of that, 199 voted in favor of her, and of course 82 in favor of the DA candidate, and 17 spoiled votes. You're looking at a National Assembly of 400 MPs, of which we need to start thinking about some of those calculations about who didn't vote. Apart from the fact that there's been a block opposition protest or abstention from voting from the EFF, I think you've got to also look within the party, and especially within the ANC as well, and raise the question about those that are in the caucus, in the ANC benches, who either their votes were spoiled or they just didn't come out and vote. And I think that is an indication that she's not going to have an easy time. It's going to be a tough ride for her. And more importantly, I think the mettle that she shows, particularly with the EFF in the House, and they can really get under your skin. And we saw that with the former Speaker as well as Ms. Baleka, where the EFF really pounds at you. They go at you at such a dramatic and constantly, it's almost an irritating way in which they come at you. And I think whether or not she shows that mettle and how she's going to get to that, because right now she's not the kind of individual that comes without controversy. She's a very contested individual that's sitting in a very powerful position as the executive authority over the National Assembly. And I think that's going to be immediately something that's constantly going to be thrown back at her in ways that will either be about how you conduct yourself according to the rules and the behavior of the rules in the National Assembly and the House, and of course the whole question of the committees and so forth. But at the end of the day, she also has to oversee and preside over some very important legislation, not least of all which Sabu had mentioned regarding the fact that she is also under investigation by a parliamentary committee, particularly the Standing Committee on Defense. So yeah, not good days for her, I think.
And you're raising an important point. The fact that there is a parliamentary committee that needs to investigate part of the work that she did as defense minister, does that dent the moral credibility and moral standing that she needs to hold as the Speaker? Because on one hand, she'll need to oversee other processes, that determine what the fate of others who are under investigation through Parliament, how those need to be handled.
Bizarre, isn't it, Kathy? I mean, I never thought we could get this bizarre in terms of Parliament, but I think it's really bizarre, and the events in which have around how we have arrived at this very weird situation again raises the questions that we've been just debating in the run-up to this election. The moment we knew that her name was one of those names that are going to be put forward by the ANC caucus, and let's leave aside how we arrived there, but let's talk about the process itself. And the fact of the matter is, if she doesn't just have this controversy, I think her credibility was dented even before this. There's a number of issues where she didn't really abide by executing her office in the mandate and credibility that she's supposed to execute as a minister. Those are all controversies and shadows that she brings, that lurks around her, and she brings into this position. So I think in a sense, what we're looking at is we're going to be watching her and how she actually oversees these processes. I think today it was quite interesting the way that when she accepted the election, accepted her win. She talked about the mandate and the credibility and all of that. But, that really is the kind of standard warranty that these politicians bring. They always talk the talk, but this warranty doesn't really have any effectiveness. And think at the end of the day, there's going to be this watching brief. They're going to constantly look at her. They're going to constantly ask the questions. And I think this, again, makes it very, very sad that we've ended up in a situation where Parliament's oversight and Parliament's accountability role over the executive is once again brought into question.
Sanusha, one of the things that we know is that Parliament has committed to investigating and trying to get to the bottom of the role and the work of the executive, particularly around the looting that took place in this country in July. That is, those are developments that Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula would have also been quite close to as the defense minister of this country, and some admissions that she, alongside some of her other counterparts in cabinet, acknowledged that, they were too slow to act, and that there were really grave mistakes that were made on their part in terms of responding to that looting. Can she in any way influence the kind of investigations that are held by Parliament into that looting?
Kathy, the point here is that it may not be in the way that we think about a direct influence, or the way in which we want to see that separation of powers between what the executive is held accountable for in terms of what we saw as the situation that unfolded in early July. But I think it's also the question of how does she direct the caucus? How does she direct the National Assembly? What is the relationship to the party chief whips, and how does she open up that dialogue to say, I'm impartial? Yes, I've basically had a different perspective. I also made I differed with the president in certain circumstances when I was asked about that. But this is a different position for me, and I can remain impartial. I think for me, that's always going to be that question in terms of, does she remain that impartial? And I think that's what we have to see. Let's not just make assumptions right now, but I think once we start getting into the nitty-gritty of these processes and what comes before her as the Speaker of the National Assembly, and where she has to play a critical intervening role to get this House in terms of the consensus, in terms of moving forward on particular processes and issues, it's going to be there that we're going to probably see a lot of what we are now speculating on and talking about. But again, the problem here is that she's already got these lurking shadows. And of course, the challenge is she has to prove herself, whereas the opposition parties and the other members of Parliament and the individuals that are sitting in Parliament will constantly checking up on her and saying, well, are you really that impartial individual, or are you pushing a particular kind of narrative and agenda?
Given how chaotic some of the sittings of Parliament are anticipated to be right now, given the lay of the land, what impact is this going to have on the work of Parliament?
Parliament's got a lot to do. I mean, they're coming. I mean, I think they've come back. They'll probably also have to rise in some time later in the year and go back to constituency work. They've got to basically go and get the processes around particular legislation and move it from where it is in terms of the committees. If it comes to the National Assembly, let me give you one example, amendment to Section 25 of the Constitution. That whole process has also been under controversy in terms of the current or the proposal that was put forward, the proposal by majority that was put forward for public comment. That proposal comes back. They have to, the ad hoc committee has to complete its work. It has to go to the National Assembly. If it gets stuck in the National Assembly, what is her role? And these are critical issues. What if there's bills that basically go to the president and don't get signed? They come back. There's a spectrum bill as well. There's the new green paper that's out for comment on the Social Security retirement insurance. There's a whole lot of interesting bills that are going to be presented to Parliament or in the current stream of Parliament. And at times she'll have to probably play a very critical role in how she addresses these issues and brings about these levels of consensus. And I think here is where it's going to be a tough sell at times, particularly where her role previously may be under scrutiny in terms of, as you rightly said, the chaotic nature of some of the processes in Parliament. I think last year, or in terms of where they were in processing bills, I think there was around about just under 50 bills that needed to be processed, etc. But not many got through the whole kind of legislative processes in terms of where they needed to be. And I think, again, we're going to sit with bills that will then carry over to next year. There are some urgent bills that needs to be to get its traction and move forward. So this is where I think her work will be cut out for her. If there's basically no consensus, or there's going to be an objection to a particular bill that doesn't satisfy some of the political parties, I think within her own party there'll have to be consensus building as well. If she does see this as something that's not in the national interest and so forth, there's a whole lot here. And Parliament is not an easy place to be at right now, but it's never been an easy place. And you've got to have your mettle, and you've got to know how to maneuver and navigate those processes.
Political analyst Manusha Naidu, let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you so much for your time on News at Prime.